So we're going to take a look at Sparta. This is Plague Island Games, and I thought there was another credit to it. Okay. I thought there was a dual sort of development side to this. Anyway, I've got, first of all, this is a review copy, and it's sort of the premium Kickstarter version, which is really cool of them. I never expect the best, but it's not as necessary in this game. Another game that I got relatively recently, Europa Universalis Price of Power. I feel like you kind of need the deluxe version. In fact, you need better than the deluxe version. You need a couple more counter sets for that game. For this one, I think it's completely playable with all the options and everything, without any of the expansion items. This may have been an expansion item, which, let's see. I don't think so, actually. I think that actually just comes with it. Wait, additional miniatures. Athena replaces the battle strength marker. Yeah, okay. I'm not using Athena. There's an extra. Yeah, there's a couple extra pieces here. I might end up picking them out. Okay, so let's take a look. Well, let's talk a little bit about the subject matter. This is going to handle the period of the Peloponnesian Wars, or war, depending on how you want to look at it. There's a nice little history that goes into some of the history of the Peloponnesian Wars, as well as everything else, which is kind of cool. I have a number of games on this subject matter already, all right? And when I looked at this, and you can kind of see it, I thought, maybe looks a little too Euro-ish for my taste, and it definitely has some Euro or Wuro type mechanisms in it, and it also very much has Euro-style pieces to it. However, it does capture the flavor of the history pretty well from what I've seen. I managed to play the first scenario of the game, and then you can cobble together, the rules give you ways to do this, multiple scenarios, and you can get it so that you cover the entire span, which is what I'm going to do in my playthrough. I wanted to make sure that I could handle the transition from one game to the other, or from one scenario to the other, without any questions. So I played through the entire thing. The play of it is also kind of odd. So, there's concepts here that are not, that don't feel like a normal war game in any sort of way. So that's something that took me some getting used to before. Now, what else do I have on this period? I have the two Mark Herman games, Pericles and Peloponnesian Wars, or War, I'm not sure which it's called. Pericles is based off of there's another one off of it, the Churchill type system, but with a totally different feel than Churchill has. It's a 4-player game, and you've got 2 players on a side, and they're kind of competing to make their side work well, and competing within their side, between each other within their side. So you actually capture some of the political, it's usually faced more on the Athenian side, the sort of political conflict between the different powerful parties within that. And so there's ways you can kind of screw each other over with kind of a Republic of Rome type feel, but just 2 players on a side. And Sparta has a similar mechanism in play as well. It's a really clever design, in my opinion. Although I struggle, like with playing this for the first time, We'll see if I get better. I struggle with kind of the strategy of what you should be doing to play with that. Peloponnesian War that's been recently reproduced by GMT, I believe. And geez, it's not going to be over there. I got that somewhere over here. It's got to be near Pericles there. I've got the old Victory Games one. Yeah, it's kind of squeezed in that dark space next to Pericles there. That's got a kind of a weird mechanism to it. It was designed as a solo game, but where you switch sides depending on what happens, and you're trying to like maintain some sort of balance. And it may actually generate reasonable effects, but the mechanism to that solo play didn't appeal to me. So I played a 2-player, and I feel like that may not be where it shines the best. It really didn't capture my imagination very well. The one this reminds me the most of is something that I don't know if I can find. There it is. Imperial Governors and Strategos. The part of the game that I like better, that's got two different games to it. Strategos covers the Peloponnesian Wars. This actually reminds me a lot of what the kind of thinking that goes into that game. And with a lot less emphasis on detail, and given how abstract that game is, in a way I think this works a lot better. This is also a hell of a lot shorter as far as I can tell. It's hard to tell because I've only played, that first scenario, and this, for this to cover the entire span that covers, you have to do all the scenarios. Well, all but the last one. So this actually covers more territory. But I think this is a shorter game. It also feels like, so Peloponnesian War had Strategos had a little bit of clunkiness to how some of the mechanisms worked that I didn't really like all that much. The final one that I can think of that I have on this, I have a pure Euro one, which I think is also called Pericles, which is downstairs. I've covered that as well. I'm not going to even discuss that in the same. That truly is a Euro, okay? And it felt. It's a 2-player Euro, but it felt more like a Euro than this does, and didn't really capture the spirit too much, in my opinion. Although it's a fun game in and of itself. The one that I didn't cover yet is the Clash of Arms. That's on the other side of Pericles there, that black box. And I'm a little scared of that one. I've heard things that it's a horrible game. It goes into a lot of detail. At some day I will get to it, I'm sure, but that day ain't today. All right, let's talk a little bit about the components that this one's going to have, and they're kind of impressive. But again, this is the most deluxe version. So like, there's apparently 3 variants to the game. The basic version, and again, you have everything you need in that basic version. And then a deluxe edition that gives you some additional pieces. Yeah, okay. And Kickstarter exclusive, which is what I got, which gives just a couple extra little bonuses. So we'll talk about the deluxe. You get more of these, you get a bunch of these wooden counters. You're going to get some wooden pieces anyway, but you get a bunch of them. But to be honest, everything that you need is on this counter sheet. You'll see I also don't have the money punched out. That's because they give you these really nice metal coins. Which are just really, it's sort of the over-the-top pimp out your game type feeling for all of this stuff, and that's okay. And let's see, what else do you have? The other thing you get is this tray full of minis. Now, I found the minis, not particularly pleasant to use. Basically, so here you have numbered wooden pieces, by the way. Numbered wooden pieces that indicate, hey, this is a hoplite army, whatever. Instead, you can use these plastic minis. They're great and everything. You can paint them up and use them in an RPG if you don't want to use them in this. But I found it was too hard to figure out which number I had on any particular one. Now you can put a number on, you know, the shield of these guys or on the bottom of the counter or something like that. The boats were even harder to discern which one was which. The very, very slight differences between some of the boats, especially these two Athenian boats that both have sails, were very painful to tell what the difference is between them. They actually look the same to me, except this has a little tiny foresail in front of it. Okay. And then there's ones with no sail that look kind of like monitors. They just didn't add much to the game for me. The boats especially took up a lot of space. They have a wide base. And then you have a couple of these which come with the Kickstarter only edition. Athena is to replace this. Again, I really don't think a mini particularly adds much. And this Discus guy is to replace this, which is one of a bunch of favors that are available in the game. Okay. So that's going over, you know, some of the bonus pieces and whatever that you get in the bonus edition. But let's look at the primary parts of the game. First of all, you have a board, no doubt, which has a number of pieces of information on it. It has these locations, which have a number of pieces of information for them. The size of the city, which is going to be important for how much influence you're going to need to put on it, whether or not it's a port, which area it's in, that'll connect to one of these. These wood too? No, these are just heavy card stock, very heavy card stock. Essentially the equivalent as far as I'm concerned. Now, one thing that I found kind of disturbing was these little markers here. These are marking the big cities, the megalopolises or whatever, or metropolises, which all it does is it's telling you, hey, you can deploy troops from out of here if you control it. I couldn't figure out what it was for. I found the rule book itself difficult to deal with. It's written in a very modern Euro-influenced style, and lots of pictures, not a lot of numbers, and it feels like there's sort of a lack of discipline throughout it. I don't think there were actual problems. Oh, I wanted to go into yeah. So why did I choose to go with this? Other than I'm interested in the time period, and but conversely, it had this Euro look to it. Was the designer of this game is Chris Van Beurden, who has done two games that I was intrigued by. Europe in Turmoil, which I had a good time with. It's a Compass game. Both of the games that I played of his are Compass games. But I felt like he brought interesting twists to the CDG mechanism, in not so much in that, but in Barbarians at the Gate. I really liked Europe in Turmoil. Don't get me wrong there. I thought it was a really cool game. Not the tight kind of competitive game that Twilight Struggle is, but it showed like a playing with history in a way that, you know, I really enjoyed what was generated from it. And if there's anything now, you know, I used to always say, hey, I would take Pax Britannica and try to use that as a starting point so I could do a World War I scenario from it. I didn't feel like there was enough information in Pax Britannica, though. I actually feel like Europe in Turmoil is capable of generating a pretty good, at least European side of how World War I is going to turn out. And honestly, all the colonial stuff and everything, that doesn't play out as much in any of the World War I games that I have, and most notably, I would be probably trying to convert that over so I can play La Grande Guerre from it. Unlikely that I'll ever get around to it, because I have things like Conquest and Consequence here, which, you know, links in with Triumph and Tragedy. I have Gathering Storm over Asia, which with Gathering Storm links into A World at War. It's just, I sort of have so much, you know, already in the making for things that those will cover the beginning of World War II. The other one that I played of his is Barbarian at the Gates, and I'm trying to look for where that's hiding in here. It's got to be down there somewhere. There it is, right at the edge. Yeah, so that one I felt really... So Europe in Turmoil had a little bit of developmental issues with it. Barbarian at the Gates, I felt like it had more problems that are the kind of things that a good developer would have resolved. Now, Compass, I think, doesn't actually give you a developer. I think they just don't have anyone on staff to fill that role. And I think they kind of leave it to the designer to try to muddle their own way through things. I'm not positive about this, but very few, if any, of their games are released with a developer. Let me switch batteries. I really think there's an important role there for someone who isn't as invested in the game to be able to say to the designer, look, this needs to be fixed. Also to liaison with playtesters, make sure you've got, you know, a good blind testing type environment and all kind of stuff like that. There were significant rules issues with Barbarians at the Gates. And yeah. And actually, the combination of Compass and Van Beerden is part of why I said, you know, I don't really want to get Europe in Turmoil 2. Also with the fact that I have quite a few games that cover sort of the prelude to World War II. But I really did like Europe in Turmoil, and I probably should pick that one up. However, I don't know. I've sort of slowed down as to buying games anywhere, and kind of just don't trust Compass for a number of reasons. For the connection to this, Plague Island games or whatever? Yeah, Plague Island games. I did one preview for them, which was this 2 Minutes to Midnight down here, which was kind of a more detailed and perhaps a little bit more scripted Twilight Struggle type game. And I really liked what I saw of it. There were some issues there, but again, it was a preview, so those might have shaken out by actual production time. There was a lot to that game that really intrigued me, and the designer of that game is the developer of this game. So I had kind of a, hey, this sounds really cool. And this is a game that was on Van Beerden's mind for a fair amount of time, and apparently he's put it through a lot of iterations and everything. So it had already been reworked quite a bit, I think, probably by the time somebody picked it up and decided to put it through a Kickstarter. I'm not a big fan of Kickstarters. I'm great with getting games for free, though. So, I mean, not across the board. Like I said, I'm gotten really pickier and everything. This one I was convinced into, and I'm glad I was. So let's go back to where we are on the components and the different places that we're dealing with here. So I kind of explained most of the maps. You got these roads as well, which indicate connections that the hoplites are going to travel on. Some of the roads are green. They're not in existence yet. until that colony is created. Now those colonies are the one place where if you have the deluxe edition, you're going to actually need these to punch a couple of counters out of. What else do you have on the map board? Wow, this is going to be a huge video. Haven't even gotten to the rules yet. The rules are actually probably going to be shorter than normal because I had struggled so much with the rule book that maybe I'll be able to do a better job than I usually am. Because A, my reading of the rule book left me with, I don't understand what this game is going to be like. Now, I think I understand part of that. Part of it's because of the sort of modern Euro-ish type formatting to the rule. That felt like it doesn't have as much discipline. But again, it does not seem to have big holes in it or anything. There are a couple of places where I'm kind of like, and in the scenarios, there's a couple of places where cards are not necessarily, the names on the cards differ from the names in the rule book, which can cause definite issues to setting up the scenarios. But let's see, what else do we have? All right, let's start from over here. We got this little thing. That's an optional module that's gonna allow you to resolve the Olympics and the rewards from the Olympics in a more complicated mechanism. It's not very complicated, but it's more so and has more mechanical steps in it. You have a set of player aids in here. Now, there's 2 copies of the main player aid, and I've got the front and back within this plastic sheet. If I open this up, there's a 3rd player aid in there for the solo bot game. I'm not going to touch the solo bot game. I'm not going to talk about it much at all, except to express that, hey, there's one in here that allows you to try to play the game competitively against a system. I'm not a fan of playing games like that, and I found that this actually solos pretty well, although some of the thinking in it, like in Strategos, is some of the systems feel kind of deterministic. Okay, and that makes it difficult. It gives a sort of chess-like nature to the game that is not necessarily great for solo play. So, yeah, be aware. I found that it played okay for me, but then again, I can play Go solo. I can't play chess solo, but I can play Go solo. At least I used to be able to. All right, next thing. You have various leaders. Each side has their own little section that they're going to keep track of stuff. And they have leaders. Some of them are unnamed leaders. So it'll say not a named leader on it. And they represent more a role within that society. They have a symbol up on top that tells you what scenarios they're part of. They have special rules. On the back side, they have an elite or a veteran version of the leader, which if they end up surviving a battle, they may end up converting over to, which gives them a better benefit. And those benefits can be kind of interesting. So like, if victorious in battle, you may spend 1 favor to gain 2 talents. It's sort of like just a special ability that you can kick in. Sometimes they give you a +1 in battle, which is probably better, you know, but these are all kind of neat little things that fit to the personality. The veteran side always has a bonus, like this is reduced strength loss by 1 in a sea battle. Great, that's cool. Okay. You have a player card, which gives you spaces for your hoplites and trireme fleets. Not all of them start the game in play in the scenario I'm playing, which is why there's a space empty here. Over here, we've got someone who's already assigned. That fleet is deployed. That's why there's a leader there, when there's a leader there. You have spaces to keep the ready leaders on one side and the spent leaders on the other. I'm a little iffy about whether I should turn this to face the same way as that, so that things are not, I don't know. So that I have my ready leaders up there, but that may confuse me. I don't know. We'll see. This is a starting piece that you get at the beginning. You have a treasury in which you can keep your pretty metal coins in. You also have this, which is desperate times counter. That allows you to basically drop an army to defend your home city right away. And you can use that once per game, once per scenario, I'm guessing. Anyway. You have the base sequence of play there. That's going to be spelled out here as well on the player aid with a little bit more detail. Each player has one, so that's fine. And I actually found the player aid to be very, very helpful once I switched to it. It gives me the sequence of play. It gives me what each player turn is like, some core rules of what happens in the game. Some of this stuff was hard to find in the rules, okay? Like, I had to ask a question because I couldn't find the victory conditions. They're not that hard to find, but they're actually in the turn sequence. They're buried in the turn sequence. It's kind of weird because what are the victory conditions to the game? Well, at the end of however many of the scenarios that you're playing, whatever, it's how many of these area markers you're going to actually control, which is pretty appropriate. Then we have how the different military actions that take place during your turn, during your action phases, are actually handled mechanically, and how battles are handled. Most of the questions you have are going to be present on here and easier to find and easier to understand because distilling the information that's on there from the rulebook is sometimes kind of difficult. There are a couple of places where it's like, hey, you really need to look in the rules for this part, and they actually give you notes for that in the player aid. Very, very helpful. So I would say rely heavily on the player aids in this game because they are going to help you a lot. And again, that's kind of a Euro-ish feel to it, right? Like, yeah, we won't concentrate as heavily on getting the rules as perfect as they might be. We're going to get you so you can play the game properly using the player aid and fiddling around with some pieces and get an idea of how the game works from that. But there are subtleties to how the game works. Just like in Strategos there were. Let me swap batteries again. I'll get to more of these components. How often do I have to spend this much time on components? Damn. Thing is, a lot of the information contained on the board in the components and whatnot, again, like many Euros, is really of vital importance to understanding the game. Okay. So where are we next? I think we've covered the map for the most part, but not everything on the board. So let's look over here. Over here, you have aligned assets. These are going to be present in any land battle that you're involved in. So here you can see Sparta has this. This is an elite piece a veteran piece. It is also an elite, but in which it's a real hoplite. This is the non-veteran side, but Sparta starts off with an elite at veteran status. They also start off with control of Persia, so I'm giving them the Persian cav and fleet. I'm not absolutely certain that's correct. The rules are kind of... The scenario rules are kind of fuzzy about that, but I think that's what should be happening, is that they actually have that extra presence available. Over here are tracks for the Army and Navy strength. These are going to be values that are used along with these assets for the land battles. The Army strength affects how likely you are to win a land battle. Okay? There's There's not a die roll for combat in this game, for the most part. But what there is these battle cards, and each player is going to start with one in this scenario. So let me deal a couple out and show you what they're like. So this battle card, well, this one deals with fleet battles, so I won't look at that first. So this overrated reputation, reduce an opposing elite asset, or you gain a battle strength. Then you may reduce a skirmisher asset to gain an additional battle strength. So your randomness in the game is dependent on what battle cards you have, but you do have the opportunity, like in many battle cards type systems, to kind of choose to play them as you like. My damn battery is not going right. So what you're going to be doing when you run a battle is you're going to be adding up for bonuses. Whoever has the most elites, whoever has the most skirmishers, whoever has the most cav is going to get a point. Then whoever has the highest army strength, this is for a land battle, is going to get a point. If you're in friendly territory, you get a point. And that's all tracked on here, and you could use the Athena thing if you wanted to get you to a battle strength. That's your starting battle strength, but then you have the opportunity, starting with the attacker, to play battle cards and to change the situation. And if you change the situation as to who has an advantage somewhere, or you could also just gain battle strength off things, plus also some of the leaders give a battle strength, whatever. So what it comes down to is when you're done playing cards, one side or the other may have a victory. So the luck is kind of baked into the cards that you're holding in your hand, but you have an opportunity to play them, and you need not, which is to say you can reserve battle cards that are really powerful for a better or more important battle. That usually doesn't happen. I'm not usually a big fan of battle card systems. Think here of We the People or Hannibal by GMT. Both of those kind of just didn't do it for me. Like, I don't know if you're like dealt a hand of cards. I seem to remember you're dealt a hand of cards each battle and you play them out as you like, but maybe you get additional for other reasons. But with this, I feel like there's something kind of cool with the way these work, and I don't, maybe it's just because I'm not really grasping the game completely that I don't dislike them yet. But I kind of feel like there's something, I don't know, there's something really kind of cool about how they work out. You don't know what you're facing. They're not just, oh, I've got somebody on the left wing, can you match that? No, I can't. Okay, you lose, type of thing. I never really liked that kind of play. It felt cumbersome. But here, mainly because I'm holding them between battles and whatnot, it feels like it's representing the kind of cards that CDGs tended to use out of your normal hand, but that just ate up regular resources. Here they're not. They're something specific. And it's kind of interesting, when you go into a battle, if you have 2 or less battle cards, you get to draw one for free. If you have a big handful of battle cards, if you've reserved a lot, you don't get that free bonus. Of course, you know what you're able to play, but you kind of want to keep yourself at 2 or less for as much time as you can, although you might be able to stock up and get extra battle cards by playing other cards during the game. Okay. Naval battles work very much like the land battles. Let me do something about that battery. It's just not charging. The viewer suggested I clean the connections within it, so I just did that with some isopropyl. It looks like it's worked a little better. It's still, I still plug it in and it doesn't quite connect right. I have to jiggle it around a little bit, but it's working a little better. So hopefully that. So naval combat works very similar to the army combat, but the modifiers are a little different. So here you use allied fleets instead of all those different asset types. They're your assets for this, and so you can only get +1 off them. Naval strength, whoever has the highest gets +1, and Once again, if you have control of the region, you get a +1. So again, it sets your strength, and then you use battle cards, and here's one that's naval. Let's get an idea. Reduce an opposing allied fleet asset, which will destroy a normal one and drop a veteran one to normal. You may then reduce your allied fleet asset to gain 1 battle strength. So you got kind of an interesting options for, and where it says may, it's your option. Okay. So that covers really everything over here. Here it tells you very clearly what happens when you win or lose. Some of it. There's a little bit more detail over there. Not much more in the rules. But if you win the battle, you lose a point of strength, and you gain one of these favor chips, which again are nice wooden pieces. If you lose the battle, you lose 2 points of strength. And if you draw, both people lose 1 point of strength. Nobody gains any favor. Okay. The cards themselves, we've already looked at the battle cards. This is a deck that's used throughout all the scenarios, and just it's reshuffled every turn. Yeah, that's actually working pretty well. Didn't think. I mean, I know to clean like the heads of tape decks and stuff. I didn't think about this. They don't really look the same. You have these guys. Now hold on. I'm going to deal out 6 of these to each player because they start the game with them. This is kind of a complicated set though, and I'll talk to you why. What makes these kind of complicated is there's little symbols on some of them. Wow. I seem to have gotten very few of the symbol ones. So for this scenario, this little owl is sort of the symbol, and it indicates, hey, this is for that. But they also have which era of a particular scenario that the card belongs to and is added to the deck in. So in this case, the Boeotian War is where this one shows up. And then once this is actually used, it'll be removed. And it has sort of a rule to it. Hey, you can send a lesser envoy to this town, whatever. Okay. But it's kind of complicated what you set up. And you look at this one like military assistance. This is specifically added in the scenario, but it doesn't have any mention of the scenario. And it's got like Corinthian War in it. I don't know why it has that. It feels like it's more generic, but I don't know. We shall see as we go further in the game. I haven't really looked at the other scenarios other than the setup going between the First and Second Peloponnesian War. You have turn record tracks up here. Now, for example, in this case, the Second Peloponnesian War is over here under these things, and the Theban-Spartan War is over here. We have little tiles which are going to cover other wars, and there's 2 of those. In this case, we're doing the First Peloponnesian War. I just put that over here. And this is the turn indicator. And then that fleet there shows up and ends up over here on the Aetolian card on turn 2. You also have leaders that are added on each thing, and additional cards are added. So underneath this deck, I have cards that are going to be added when we enter the Athenian crisis on turn 2. Okay. There's one other thing I haven't really talked about, which is these. If you control the majority of little pips, well, if you control more little pips than your opponent does, and control is going to be expressed with one of these circles, then you gain control of, well, in this case, this would be the Peloponnesus, of that area's value. And at the beginning of the turn, these are going to be assessed, and you get any assets. So this would go over here into the elites. You get any coinage along with your state income at the beginning of the turn. And yeah. So we have a number of those around here. These are allies. They have a slightly larger piece to them. Let's see, Persia's already assigned. And they work in a similar fashion, but you don't gain control of an alliance through taking over a territory. You gain it basically just through the Sparta cards, the main event cards of the game. What else do we have? We have little cubes on here. These are how you work your way up to control. So the number of little doinkers on top of a space is how many cubes you need to have control over it. And those cubes are kind of like the points in, say, Twilight Struggle or a number of other games. Where they align one side or another. So this is one influence by Athens. This is one influence by Sparta. If I got a third influence by Sparta here, I would get Thebes. But if Athens puts influence in, they take cubes away from the Spartan cubes. And the way that you get additional cubes is generally through envoys, which will be mentioned on some of these cards. So let's find one here. Spend a favor to send a lesser envoy to a space in Anatolia and one in Thessaly. If you don't have any favors, opponent chooses one of those regions and you send only that envoy. So you're going to have a lot of like looking at your cards and trying to figure out, hey, you know, if I delay a little, no, it's not holding up right. If I hold off a little bit, will I be able to get the bigger reward? You know, or there's also the question of, do I want to spend a favor? Because favor can be useful for a lot of things, and I don't know whose favor it is. The gods? Okay, we'll talk about the favor markers. So, now this is a little weird. Athens has, as part of its income, a favor marker. I don't know if it only is supposed to get this one or if it can take any one it likes. I think it's only supposed to get this one, which means if that one's already gotten, I don't know, does it take it from someone else? Maybe. That's not clear. That's one of the things in the rules. You have these others. These, I think, can be used, you know, indiscriminately. And then the final favor you have is the Olympic favor, which is granted by winning the Olympics, but I think you can take it as a favor otherwise. It's just, you may lose it during the Olympics, and you may, and that's why I think that this one, if Athens, if Sparta has that, I think Athens steals it from them at the beginning of a turn. So it's one that only Athens really wants to play around with, and they want to spend it so that they get it back each turn. So yeah, we have a few other markers here. Let's take a look at some of these. We talked about most of this. These guys are going to come in through cards and whatnot, usually battle cards, but some of them come in through the event cards. These are fleets and hoplite armies that are not yet in play. And those will get added depending on things. So for example, Athens will get another fleet, but they will not get another hoplite army. But the Thebes-Corinth card, which is used in different scenarios, who's this? This is the Achaean League. This is the Theban one, has more armies available to it, right? And on the backs of all of these, that's not actually used. There's just a picture. We have multiple different Athenian allied or anti-Spartan. The game is called Sparta because Sparta's in all the scenarios, but you have to think, Athens ends up essentially losing the Peloponnesian Wars. But this goes further than that. Okay. And I have a battery here that I don't know why it's there. Ew, it resolves the mystery. The reason the other one didn't look like it was charging was it was full. It was not the battery that was meant to be in the charger. That one that was sitting there was, and now it's charging. Again, I had to wiggle it a little bit, but hey, that's really cool. Now I know something new for the remaining few years of my life. I hope it's less than that, but okay. We have some other markers that are of interest here. So these are for handling sieges. When a city is under siege or a location is under siege, it gets one of those markers to indicate. This is for raids. This is a Helot revolt. You're able to increase something to a megalopolis by one of the cards. These are supposedly triggered by cards. I don't know where they come into play. I have not run into them in the scenario that I'm playing, that I've played yet. So I'm expecting that I will run into them from here. Now, like I said, there are a bunch of, there are so many scenarios and whatnot, and as you move into different scenarios, different pieces come into play. Different leaders, different named leaders come into play, and there's a huge pile of those. More event cards come into play. There's another scenario, and Macedonia becomes more of a power. The interesting thing about this game is I think the final scenario is like 130 years after the first few scenarios. So it may not make a lot of sense to move into whatever this is, the Cleomenian War. I think that's the final one. It may not make a lot of sense to do that as all part of the same scenario. I'll make a decision and whatever. But I may end up doing it. There are rules in the game for, I believe, transiting through all the scenarios. So you can go for the Peloponnesian Wars, getting to here. Oh no, I bet you the Cleomenian is completely standalone. And then over to here, which gets you to the Theban side of things. But then there's this other thing. And what's missing is the Macedonian hegemony over Greece. So that's of some interest. Okay. Let me take a little break. And wow, battery is so happy. Let me take a little break and then, oh, I have one other thing. I have a cup here because this ends up generating, you end up throwing cubes in there and drawing 3 cubes, and whoever has 2 or more of their color ends up winning the Olympic Games. And we'll explain how that works. But that's why I have that. Oh, and I haven't talked about the dice. The dice aren't used for a hell of a lot. Like I said, they're not used for combat in general. But what they are used for is when you conduct sieges, you roll dice to see if you succeed with the siege. And these dice are really like, you know, they have 3 values on them. A success, which has your little country on it, and I hope all the dice are the same. There's like 4 successes, 2 blanks, and a failure. And I think they're all set up that way. And you roll, they should be. You roll dice, you might get a number of dice to roll for something, and they have different effects. So in battle, you do use the dice at the end of the battle to check for leaders. And a leader that gets a success gets promoted. A leader who gets a skull turns into a skull. And a blank does nothing. On a siege, a success reduces the city's value, the support value of the city. So you get closer and closer to taking it over. And a skull reduces your army strength. I think those are the only uses for it. There might be something off cards or whatnot where you also use them. I'm going to dig into the rules in more depth, but after giving the components, I feel like you have some idea of what you're going to be doing. You're going to be trying to get control of regions by controlling specific spaces within that region. And That's going to give you resources that will be helpful possibly right away, but also in later turns, right? And then also these regions are how you count victory for the game at the end of the entire scenario, whatever the entire scenario is. I'm going to kind of evaluate victory at the end of each scenario, simply as I think it's kind of interesting to not just say who won the whole grand campaign, but also who won various segments of it. I find that an interesting type of exercise or whatever. All right, I will be back. Given how long this intro has gone so far, I'm going to load this up. I'm going to do a two-part intro with the actual rules being the next part of it. Why not? That way I can play Raid, which I really should be doing right now.